Hey, Talia here, and today on I Got Back Up, I'm joined by Rob Hosking. Rob joined the police force at age 22, and through the traumas he witnessed on the job, this began the start of a 5-year cycle of poor mental health, PTSD, and struggling to never open up, leaving him with where he felt he had no other options. So, Rob, when you hear the phrase, I got back up, what does it make you think and feel?
It makes me feel kind of emotional in a bit, to be honest with you, because it brings you back to that moment in my life where I had to get back up. And my moment, and everybody's moments is going to be very different, but my moment of having to get back up was the hardest time in my life that I never felt like I could get back up from. So there's a bit of emotion there, emotional where I think, wow, yeah, I really did have to get back up. I hit so hard, the rock bottom, so hard that I had to get back up. But then it also fills me with a little bit of joy where I'm like, yeah, but I did it. I did get back up, and that's the main thing. So it's yeah, it's kind of a double-edged sword when you mention that.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Because when you are at that point, wherever that point is for whoever you are, you don't, at the beginning, you don't see the light, you don't see the way out, you don't see yourself ever getting back up from that place. Even sometimes when you fall, when you keep going back down, it's, fall 7, get back up 8. Even if you fall, sometimes the first initial thought is, oh no, I'm never going to be able to get through it. And, somehow you do.
Yeah, and that's the horrible thing and the beautiful thing about it, isn't it? Where you think you actually don't know at that point when you've fallen that it will end with you coming back, because unfortunately not everybody will get back up, and we obviously this is why you do this so you can inspire people to make sure that they know that they can get back up. But unfortunately, some people don't necessarily do it, and you don't know if you're going to whenever you've hit that fall, whenever you have fallen. So it's yeah, it's a beautiful thing and also a weird thing to think about when you think when you're in that moment, you have no idea what the end goal is actually going to be like, which is scary as when you think about it like that.
The unknown is one of the scariest yet most beautiful places ever.
Yes, 100%. I couldn't say that better.
Well, on that, I guess we'll wrap up for the day.
Yeah, well, anyway, pleasure. Cheers.
Anyway, right, let's move on now. So, I want you to take us and everyone listening, I want you to take us to where most resonates with the person you are today and everything you've been through. So, start where you want to start.
Yeah, I always start probably my story at 22 years old when I joined the police service. But I could probably take it back a little bit further back in terms of how I was brought up. Now, I had a great childhood, and I can't complain about my childhood, but there were some things that impacted who I was when I was 22 years old and how I was going to respond to things and who I was going to become. And those things that impacted me as a child were the ideas of what a man should be, this idea of masculinity, because I was from this military police family where what a man should be was a sign of strength, where they do not show their emotions. And if you ever did, you would quickly get told to man up. You'd be quickly told to grow up. She always had this idea where us men probably had to hide that child in themselves quite early on. You didn't want to show that child who would show their emotions. And that was probably, many men will probably experience that, but I think that was probably a little bit more exemplified for me because of that macho-ness that the military and policing kind of brought with it. So that was probably that shaped me probably my present moment and back when I was at 22 years old, because although it hadn't impacted me at that point up till 22, obviously here and there, and it impacted me in different ways, but at 22 when I joined the police service, when I was then subjected to trauma left, right and center, when I was subjected to excessive stress, high pressure things, literally making life death decisions, which is insane to think about when you think a 22-year-old doing all those things. All of a sudden, when I'm subjected to all that, these ideas of what a man should be, what masculinity is, they started to impact me in a negative way because I was also in part of a culture, this macho culture where policemen, they had to get on with it. You had to not show your emotions because you had to be professional. And yes, of course, you have to be professional and not show your emotions in the moment. But after we weren't showing our emotions, we weren't processing, we weren't doing debriefs, we weren't openly talking to each other. So then all of a sudden, this macho-ness really did come back to me where I'm like, yes, this is what a man should be. And I'm doing the right thing by not sharing how I feel. But I was witnessing the most horrific things you can probably ever imagine in the world. And I wasn't speaking about it because that's not what a man should be. A man should just hold their stress to themselves. I don't need to be a burden on anyone. I don't want anybody to think I'm weak or I can't handle this job. So all of a sudden, I just put it all to the side, put it all within here. And as you can probably tell there, that shows you just probably why all the all these feelings and beliefs that I had about a man and masculinity as a child, all of a sudden they started impacting me. Not really as a teenager as much, but now in this culture that I was part of, in this job that I was part of, these beliefs started impacting me in such a negative way.
Something really interesting on that is when you look at it with, men, male and female, and men, like you said, are taught to be masculine and don't show emotions, and then female, theoretically speaking, are too emotional, and that's also a bad thing. So we are all growing up in this culture where no one really wants to share emotions because men are told not to because it's not masculine, and women are told it's wrong to show too much emotion. And we're all just sitting here not showing our emotions, not expressing our emotions, and either living in this masculine for men, or you don't want to be too feminine as a female.
Yeah, 100%. Now, as a motivational speaker, I talk a lot about psychological safety in workplaces and how we can create a culture where psychological safety exists. And I think you've hit the nail on the head there, where I don't think psychological safety really properly exists in society for men or women, because, as you say, we're all dealing with different things, but we don't want to show too much emotion because we think we're going to get judged whatever way, whatever gender you may be. You think you're going to get judged in some form or another. So we don't feel safe, do we? We don't feel safe in a society to show our emotions. We don't feel safe to show vulnerability. Yes, people will be able to show a lot more vulnerability. They'll feel safer to show vulnerability, especially around a group of friends. But as a society, I think we're definitely not doing that well and showing vulnerability to the extent that we probably need to. So we're we're probably traumatized people in so many different ways and levels, talking to different traumatized people and thinking that we've got our act together when we're actually all just trying to get by each day, where we don't know how to cope, to be honest with you, because we've not really been taught, we've not really been brought up in a society to help us cope and make us understand how we cope with our emotions. What's the best way to cope with our emotions without seeming too emotional, without seeming too hard, and
Mm-hmm.
you're not going to show any emotions? Where's the balance? And obviously, with the genders, I think you've made a really good point that it's not just men too, because I think in society we do think men and their emotions, there's a real stigma there around it, but it can happen in any gender too, in just different ways and different meanings. So yeah, we're all just trying to figure it out. And when I was a police officer, 22 years old, all of a sudden I was trying to figure out a lot of things about life. I was trying to figure out how I was going to manage this stress that I was under, that I'd never been under. I never had that responsibility before in my life. Yes, I had responsibility in certain jobs, but there's a wee bit of a difference between that and then going into the police and someone's life being on your hands. And it's um it's a responsibility that probably no 22-year-old should have to go under, because they're not, I don't think they're psychologically, emotionally mature enough to go to be dealing with this kind of stuff. And I know everyone's going to mature at different levels emotionally, but is anybody ever emotionally mature enough at 22 years old to have been making life death decisions? I probably doubt it. I probably doubt it anyway. But I had to. So all of a sudden, as I said, this idea of what a man should be started impacting me in so many different ways. And as part of a culture where we didn't speak about our mental health, we didn't speak about stress in the job. So how did I process my emotions? I didn't. And whenever I took my uniform off after a shift, whenever I opened that door and closed that office door, guess what? My trauma came with me because that's what trauma does. Trauma doesn't just go like, I'll be waiting for you at work when you come back, it's fine. It comes with you. And I was going home and my head was hitting the pillow each night. And when my head hit the pillow each night, all of a sudden it comes to me because you'll never outrun trauma. And I was thinking about the things I'd done, the life death decisions I'd made. And I was thinking, could I have done something different to save that person's life? What happens if I just done that? What happened if maybe I just changed this? I'm thinking about all these things when my head hit the pillow each night and I wasn't being able to talk to anybody who could probably say, by the way, no, Robert, you've done everything possible in this situation.
Mm.
So I was driving myself a bit crazy, so to speak, and it was not a very happy place to be in my mind because that was happening all the time.
Yeah.
Because I'm talking about trauma, and then guess what? The next day, more trauma was getting added onto that, and then I'd be going back to bed, and all these new traumas were impacting me, and then I'd go again, and more traumas, more traumas, more traumas. I wasn't healing from any of it, but I was adding on to trauma every single day. And when we do that, it's just a recipe for disaster. And certainly for me, it definitely was anyway.
And trauma seeps into every single aspect of our lives. You're right. You don't just shut the door and it goes, yeah, cool, I'll see you tomorrow. It very, very slowly seeps in, and you have no idea it's happening, but it seeps in and it seeps into every aspect, whether it's work, whether it's relationships, whatever it is. And I mean, I adding on top, on top, on top, on top. You're right. You're never healing from anything, so you're never even getting to the bottom of, let's say, the bucket of trauma because you're just filling it up every time.
Yeah. And it's such a difficult place to be because, as you say, it will seep into different parts of your life. It will impact you mentally,
Mhm.
whether we like to admit it or not, it will impact you mentally. And then physically, all of a sudden, you will start feeling something in your body, whether it's 5 years, 10 years, whatever it may be, it will impact something in your body. And it impacted my body in different levels within my story at different stages of my story. And yeah, it's just little things where I remember having the flu once and, well, just kept going, not taking the time off that I needed to. And then a few days of healing, that was fine. 2 days, I think it was 2 days, I was able to be like, I'm flu free. Happy days, I feel good. And then I got the flu again. And I was like, again with the flu. I'm like, wait a minute, this isn't normal. I remember thinking to myself, it is not normal to be that sick that often. And I'm like, I'm good. My immune system's good usually. And I had to think, it's the trauma that I'm under, that stress that I'm under, because when stress is chronic, when it's excessive, when trauma is so present, your body will tell you, I'm going to tell you to listen because you're not listening to anything else. So I will make you listen. And it shows up with your health.
Yeah.
Like the amount of these diseases that people have, the chronic diseases, the aches and pains, or whatever it may be to different levels, we can probably 99% of them, I think, track it back to some kind of trauma, to some kind of emotional thing that's happened where you think that's why it's been caused.
Yeah.
And for me, looking back, especially, I can see so many different things where I'm like, in that process of my life, in that stage of my life, okay, I was going through maybe a few health things. I'm like, now I look back and like, that's why. Because ever since leaving the police, I'm very healthy and I don't have like this just consistent flu, whatever it may be, however long it may last. I don't have that. And I feel so much healthier within myself because I've got a better relationship with stress. I've all of a sudden started to get on top of my trauma. But at that point in my life, I didn't. So it was a very unhappy place at that time. And I remember it went to boiling point, and this is probably where we talk about the resilience and how I got back, because I went through such a horrible time in my life when I was 25, when I hated it. I hated my life. I hated my work. I hated the stress that went with it. I hated the trauma that went with it. I hated the workplace culture that went with it. And then I hated my personal life, because anytime I had some free time, I felt like I was sleeping on my days off. I wasn't really doing much. I was very unhappy in so many different areas of my personal life. And I felt I was just living to work in a job that I hated. So I was like, what's happening here? And I remember my mum visited me once, and you know what mums are like, they always know. You can never hide anything from your mum. And my mum sat and she just looked at me and she's like, Robert, I don't think you're happy. And I was like, what do you mean? Especially when someone calls you out like that, you're going to get defensive. And I was like, what do you mean? Of course I'm happy. And she's like, no, Robert, there's something's different. You're unhappy. And yet again, I pushed her away and dismissed it. 3 weeks later, I saw light at the end of the tunnel of what I was going through. And unfortunately, that light at the end of the tunnel was to take my own life. My mum knew at the time that I was probably that close to rock bottom. My mum knew that there was something wrong, but I couldn't admit it to her, because I hadn't admitted it to myself, just how far down that rock bottom I was. And yet again, we talk about that masculinity and that idea of what a man should be. I didn't want to show vulnerability. I didn't want to show my mum that I needed help. So I didn't speak about it. And as I said, it went to that point where I decided the only way out was to take my own life, not to talk about all my feelings, not to share to everybody how I feel and to get help. The only way out was to take my own life. And when I think about that, it makes me very sad. Makes me very sad that I think at 25 years old, and like, no matter what age you are, it's very sad. But at 25 years old, I had that really flawed belief, and it all stemmed yet again from that idea of what a man should be. And that's why it's so damaging to have these beliefs, because at some point in your life, those beliefs can probably seep into your current situation and actually make you potentially lead you to a really difficult decision that you could make. And for me, that was that decision. And I remember that morning like it was yesterday, where I say morning, it was afternoon, but I think it was the morning because I woke up about 3 p.m. because that's all I did. I just slept all my days. I woke up at 3 p.m. and I thought, this was it. This was the day that the pain stops. This is the day the negativity stops. This is the day that the trauma finally ends. And it made me happy. And I walked down my hallway to go downstairs to carry out the act. I didn't think about my family. I didn't think about my friends. Didn't think about my colleagues. But divine intervention, or whatever we may want to call it, saved the day, because as I walked along the hallway, I was met by my dog, Louis. And Louis looked up at me with the big brown eyes that he's got, and he gave me one big lick. And it was that lick that snapped me out of it. It was that lick that made me think, what am I doing? Because Louis and I did everything together, and I thought, there's somebody who needs me, somebody who needs my attention, somebody who needs my love, and I couldn't leave him. I didn't care about my family at that time. I didn't care about anybody else, but that dog in that moment showed me that he needed me to live. And I'm not afraid to say that I'm here today because of that lick and because of Louis. But I didn't just get better, as you can probably imagine. I didn't just think, oh, all of a sudden life's great and I'm happy in my life. I would probably describe myself as a functioning depressive still, and I didn't share how I felt to anybody. I didn't share that potential last day until 5 years after. And that's when I felt brave enough to share it with my family. 5 years that took me to carry all that burden with me of how close I came to ending my life. And I showed up to work. I was that person smiling, laughing, joking. I was talking people down from window ledges, bridges, convincing them to live one more day. And each time I wished that I was on that window ledge and I wished I was that person on the bridge. But nobody would have ever thought, I think Rob's struggling. I think Rob's really not doing well because I hid it from everybody. And that takes a lot out of you to wear a mask, to show up in a different face every single day. So, yeah, I was a functioning depressive, but I had a reason to live and I had to cling on to that reason many times, to be honest with you.
I think we don't realize a lot of the time how many people actually do need us, and or pets, or we don't realize actually how much just our presence and our being here fills people. And I think that's something that a lot of people don't realize. Whether it's, whether it's your dog that you go on an every, you go every day on a walk with, or it's the friend that you talk to every day, even if you live in completely different countries, and it's you, or the family you live with. Like, it's so many different people and so many different things, and we don't realize how much we are actually valued and how much we are actually needed on this planet. Um, and you're right. Sometimes all it takes is that snap or that glimmer of hope or that one tiny moment, which actually in hindsight isn't tiny because it's humongous, but it's that one glimmer, that one snap, that one anything that actually shows us, no, this isn't the way. This isn't what I meant to be doing. Actually, I can work on this and I can find a way to get better.
Yeah. Yeah, when I hit that rock bottom, I didn't think that getting better, I didn't know what getting better looked like, never mind that I would get better. I just kind of felt like I would just have to struggle on until one magic day, maybe it did get better, but I didn't think about it. I just thought, okay, I just have to keep going and keep struggling on. And to be honest with you, that's what I did until my last ever shift in the police, where my last ever shift in the police kind of changed my perspective on that and
Mm.
kind of put the onus on me to make changes rather than believing I'll just randomly get better one day. It really did put the onus on me. And I remember my last ever shift, I didn't know this would be my last ever shift, firstly, until it transpired that it was. And in my last ever shift, I witnessed a 21-year-old male take his own life. And I was there for him as he took his last breaths in this world. And as you can probably imagine, a very difficult thing to watch, to be so helpless and just, honestly, just a horrible thing that I'll never forget in my life. Watching this young guy die in front of me and unable to save him. And then 5 hours later, my colleague had a heart attack on shift and died. And my colleague was on the other side of life where he had 29 years service, 1 year left until retirement. And he had often talked about his plans for the future, what he was going to do with his wife, the traveling he was going to do, all these things. And I almost felt like, although crazy as it may sound, I almost felt like Scrooge in A Christmas Carol on that day where I was being shown a past where that could have been me, that young male who didn't see any light at the end of the tunnel, any good light at the end of the tunnel, and took his life. That could have been me. I was there. Then I had the present moment where I was then and there. And then I had a future where I'm like, was I going to be in a job for 29 years, in a job that I hated, in a job that impacted me so much? Was I going to be continuing on in this life where I was just this functioning depressive? I wasn't actually putting any onus and responsibility on me to make the difference and to make the changes. And then what? To end up not having much life because I've just worked it away, whatever it may be. And I remember on that day, I realized I had to make changes. And the changes I made were to my happiness because I started to question happiness. And this is how I started to bounce back because I put onus on it. I didn't let anybody else, I didn't put the onus on anybody else. I didn't think my responsibility to get better was somebody else's responsibility. It was on me. Although it's hard to admit, but it is on me. And I started to ask myself these different questions of, well, what are my core values first and foremost? You know, at 22 years old when I joined the police, I probably couldn't spell core values then, but I knew what a core value was. And then I started asking myself, so what are your core values? And freedom, spontaneity, travel, all these things started coming up. And I'm like, wait a minute, I'm in the job as a police officer. Freedom, spontaneity, and travel is not getting met in this job. And at 22 years old, they were probably my core values too. So no wonder I was so unhappy anyway, or no wonder unhappiness was happening in my life when I was already going against a core value of mine. So once I started to know that, I'm like, right, I can now bounce back better because I know who I am as a person. And every decision I make, I have to make it aligned to those core values. Because if I can do that, if I can always bring it back, then it's an aligned life, it's a happier life. And then just started to ask myself, well, what makes me the unhappiest thing in my life? What makes me so miserable? And it was my job as a police officer. So I had to remove it. And then guess what? That got replaced by something else. So then I removed that, and then it got replaced, and then I removed that. And by this process of just removing the things that really made me miserable, I was being left in my life with things that made me happy and brought me joy.
Yeah.
And it's just such a simple thing to ask yourself, like, what makes me the most miserable thing in my life? What's that thing that really impacts me the most? Cut it. And then all of a sudden you're making space for yourself to fill it up with things that fill you up and fill you with joy. So all these different questions started getting asked, and it was a difficult time because I had to start reflecting on my own trauma too, and a lot of the traumas that I probably pushed back in the police because I went the next day and more traumas were getting added on. So I forgot about those traumas, but I had to start really looking back and think what really impacted me and do the work to kind of to get through that. And I then started to see a different me. I was a positive person again, and I'd always been a positive person. But in my time in the police, I became negative, resentful, just too hardened to my emotions and probably the emotions of other people, where I just wasn't me. I just lost sight of who I was. So all of a sudden, I started putting myself first and these values of what I hold true. And then it just kind of went from there where I started filling myself up with the right people in my life, doing the right things in my life, and you are the average of the five people you spend your most time with. And I challenge everybody who's listening to think of those five people because you probably hear it all the time, but actually think about it and see if they are people who lift you up when you need lifted up. Think, are those people also the ones who celebrate me? Because I always feel like people can lift you up when you need lifted up, when you're going through bad times, but do they also celebrate your successes? Which I think is a little bit more of a difficult thing, if I'm honest with you. So ask yourself these questions, and guess what? You're going to come up with probably hard answers that you probably don't like.
Yeah.
But happiness is hard, isn't it? Happiness is hard to find because we need to put the work in.
Yeah.
And once I started putting all onus on me, all of a sudden happiness followed.
So there were a few things that I want to mention and talk about, which you hit the nail on the head. First of all, you're right about the friends you have, or not just people around you in general. It's not just you hear a lot of people say, "Oh, I find who my true friends are around the bad things." 100%. Don't get me wrong, 100%. But also see what friends are there around the good times. And
100%.
I just kind of want to leave it there.
Yeah.
Because,
Mic drop.
yeah, because that says a lot. That
Completely
really
agree.
says who is there for you when things are going well, when something good happens, to congratulate. Who is there, not just when you're down, but who is cheering you on through the good times as well, because that there are real friends.
100%. And no matter what, jealousy exists in life for so many people. And I've seen it in my own life where these people that I thought were my friends and the police and stuff who were there for me when maybe I was going through that difficult time, all of a sudden when I started being happier and being like, this life's actually good, all of a sudden they didn't want anything to do with me because whether it reminded them of their unhappiness or whatever, they didn't want anything to do with me. And I was like, that's interesting, isn't it? But then I realized you're not my people because you don't celebrate me when I'm doing well in my life. They only ever wanted to hear the bad times and to be to feel good about themselves. Where like, yes, I showed up when they were going through the bad times. But yeah, but are you actually there and celebrating properly rather than just a text saying well done? Are you properly celebrating your friends during the good times? Because they're the true friends that you have to hold on to.
Mhm. 100%, 100%. And then also a key point that you made was until you accept you need help or you want to work on something, you want to heal through something, until you as a person accept it, you will never start the journey. You can blame every single other human being on this planet for everything you are going through. But until you take on the acceptance, that's when I think as soon as you take that on, that is the beginning of the rest of your life because that is the moment. It doesn't happen like that, like magic, but in a way it is magic. It just something shifts. And once you start taking on the acceptance, then then it starts to begin. And when I say, it's a big, I'm saying it's a big thing, then, well, what is the thing that begins? It's hard to explain, but you know it when it happens. And whatever it is that you want to work on, heal from, understand, process, it begins once you accept it yourself. And I talk about this a lot. Something like therapy, for instance. Loads of people have therapy, and again, you could be sitting in therapy for years. You could be spending, an obscene amount of money, and you could still sit there and go, but it's not working. Again, it's the exact same concept. It will only start working when you sit there and you accept it and you're like, I'm ready to deal with it. If you're sitting there and you're like, yeah, I've got stuff going on, but you're not ready to take on the acceptance, then forget it. It's not going to work. It's sticking plasters, and we've all used many sticking plasters in life. Sticking plasters, it's the same with trauma. You think you can just put a little thing on it for a while and yeah, cool, I'm good. It's like a cut, yeah, good, I'm good. I'm good for a while. Don't worry, it will find a way to manifest in a completely different way and come out. And that's where we go back to, like you were saying with the trauma, you know, even when you in a very similar but different way. Obviously, we were saying how your trauma, one on top of the other on top of the other, and then you mentioned how taking one negative thing out of your life, another thing came in, and then but again, you were working on one thing, so the next thing came to surface. Working on the next thing comes to the surface, and that happens with trauma. You work through one thing, and you're like, great, I'm healed, and then something triggers you the next morning, and you're like, what? I was on cloud nine yesterday. Well, you may still be working on that said thing, or you have actually got through that thing, but because you've let it go, the next thing comes up. It's one of my favorite phrases is new level, new devil. And
Yeah.
I think we're all work in progress, but I think that's one of the most beautiful things in life. None of us are complete perfection. And I don't think there is a single person in this world is because we are all work in progress. And long may it continue with everyone.
Yeah, exactly. And I remember after the police, after I left, I had so much resentment for them.
Mm.
And I felt it was justified. And yes, you know what? Looking back, it probably is justified because I felt like they didn't support me the way they should have supported me. Because after my colleague died, I remember going to my inspector and I said, not the same day, it was a few days after. And I said, I'm really struggling after my colleague's death. And he was typing on his laptop and he looked up at me and says, you'll need to get that sorted. And then went back to typing on his computer. And I held on to that anger and resentment. And that was just one example of how they didn't look after me. And then I blame them for the trauma because I've been diagnosed with PTSD since. So I blame them for all of it. And yeah, it is probably justified, but I realized that anger, that resentment that I was holding on to in here, it wasn't serving anything. It was only impacting me. Like a police van would drive by and I'd maybe give it a dirty look. And they're probably looking like, what's his problem? I'm like, it's only impacted me just giving that thing a dirty look because it's brought me back to a situation. And I remember I got rushed to hospital one night with chest pains, and I remember I had got all the ECG stuff on me to track my heart and monitor it. And the paramedic said each time you talk about the police, the your heart like spikes. The heart rate keeps spiking every time you speak about the police. So that's when first and foremost I thought, okay, there's clearly something here, and that's since then it was then PTSD, and that was kind of the beginning of knowing what it was. And I remember going to the doctors after that incident, and they said, right, we need to get some bloods taken. And they did some bloods, and they came back and they said, there's something wrong with your liver. There's something there. Now, I haven't drank alcohol for 5 years, and even then, I'm not an alcohol drinker anyway. I'm not a big drinker in the slightest. I was like, my liver? Jeez, right, okay, what's happened there? And they said, well, look, we need to do further tests. Now, before those further tests, I had a silent counseling session where we looked at the different meridian points in my body and saw all what was going on. And she highlighted that there was this negative energy stored in my body that she could see, I feel. And that negative energy was stuck in my liver, and it represented anger and resentment. And I said to her, I'm like, well, that makes sense because I'm so angry at the police. I'm so resentful for myself for wasting 5 years of my life. That's how I saw it at the time. And we did this process of letting go of this resentment, this anger, and me holding on to that. And I remember going back to the doctors to do further tests. And the test results came back and they said, your liver is absolutely fine. There's nothing wrong with it now, nothing's showing up. Trauma, and in this perfect example, trauma will store itself in the body somehow, whether it's visible, invisible, whether you know it or you don't. There is an example where I did not know that that anger and resentment, which was the trauma, was impacting my body, and yet it was. And if I had kept going down that route, what would have that developed into? You've no idea. All I know is that the doctor said there's something wrong with your liver that we need to do something about. We need to do further tests. And when I was able to let go of that and probably, as you say, take control and put the onus back on me and take control of my life, and realized I have the responsibility to bounce back, and I have the control to bounce back. And I will not let other people dictate it. I will not let things dictate it. I need to make sure that I'm not just going through these processes for processes' sake and say, I'm doing the therapy rather than accepting it that I need help in the first place. I need to firstly accept, right, I have a problem here that I need to fix. And then when I admitted that I had held on to anger and resentment and I was still doing it, then I was able to heal properly. And then I was able to find happiness. And it's only down to this stage where we've just spoke about of acceptance. Without acceptance, we cannot do anything. We just can't, because nothing will work. It'll just be bouncing against a barrier until you fully accept what you need.
And we can't control a lot of things in our life. We can't. And that's something we have to learn too. But there's a lot of things we can't control, but the things we can control, one of them is our reaction and the emotions, and even for example, being in traffic. Being in traffic, everyone gets angry being in traffic, even if it's a smidge. But you know, it's even little things like that. Okay, you're in traffic. I know this is a very different example, but like you're in traffic and you can either get horrifically angry, which will end up bringing up even more anger, because once you start feeling an emotion, the brain starts wiring for more thoughts about that emotion. And all of a sudden, that's why if you ever think of one angry, sad, guilty, one of those sort of thoughts, you start spiraling into more and more because the brain starts looking for them. It's the same with happiness as well, and love and those kind of emotions. So you can start getting angry and all those things start to come through, or you can just okay, it is what it is. This is my reaction. And instead of being angry, I'm going to sit here and it is what it is. I know that's a very different example, but when we do let go of those emotions, however big or small they are, things do shift, and you hit the nail on the head. You are right. Trauma stores in our body. And I know a lot of people I know a lot of people don't actually understand that, and but it does. It stays in different parts of our bodies, and we have to work through them. And sometimes you said earlier, when there are illnesses or injuries or aches and pains, etc., etc. Okay, yes, sometimes obviously yes, it might be an actual injury, but but sometimes it is energy, sorry, it is trauma that has been stored there, and over time is then manifested into the said thing that is then happening. And I see that, and there are things that I've been through, and whether it's been I was really sick at one point for about 2 months. And I couldn't get rid of a virus for nearly 2 months. And there was a moment in it when I sat back and went, this isn't just a virus, is it?
Yeah.
I was like, oh man. And but that's how I think as well. I was like, yeah, this isn't getting better. Like, this isn't just a virus. I can tell a doctor, he'll tell me as I'm just a virus, but I know this is something else.
You always wish that you think that first, isn't it? You always think, well, why could I have not got to that point earlier on in the sickness?
Yeah, there's obviously something deeper here that I need to figure out. But no, and that's what it is. Look, it's really hard to let go, surrender, release emotions, and especially to things that we can't control. Maybe it is things that, like I said, we're completely out of our control, and we're still holding those feelings too. That, don't get me wrong, it's really difficult. And some days you might feel great, other days you might not, and that's also okay. But holding on to it indefinitely is the disease. It's the disease. And you have to find the ways to release these emotions. And I these emotions, though, as much as we want to run away from them, I actually think they're, let's say, these negative emotions in inverted commas, because that's what we always classify them. They're the dark emotions, whether it's the anger, whether it's guilt, sadness, any of these things, jealousy, rejection, all of these things that make us feel rubbish. We want to run away from them. We try to push them. Honestly, we try to do everything we can, but the further we try to run and the more we try to push, the more they are clinging onto us, the more they are going to come out, the angrier they will make us, or the sadder they will make us, the more anxious they will make us. The reason is because these emotions aren't there to make your life hell. They are coming up because they're actually a cry for help. These emotions are calling out to you because something isn't right, and they're going, help me. Imagine your emotions as little people, or however you, like pets, animals, however you want to imagine them. They are crying out for help, saying, help me, because something in you, in me, is not okay. I am actually here because you need to help me. And I know it's a really different way of looking at it, but it's like it's the guest house. I've heard it before, and I heard it in meditations, and I've read about it. It's the guest house. Our minds are guest houses, and we welcome in love, we welcome in joy, we welcome in gratitude and positivity, and then we see negativity or anger at the doorstep, and we slam it shut. No, you're not coming in. Forget it. You're not coming in. But I live by light and dark, yin and yang. You don't see the stars in the sky without the darkness behind it. And once you start to hold hands with your negative emotions, and you start to understand them and work on them and understand why they're there, you actually work together rather than apart.
Yeah, I love it. And the one analogy I've heard about that is the heartbeat, because the heartbeat has the ups and the downs, and if you keep looking at the heartbeat, it'll just keep going up and down, up and down. And that's the best thing for us, because if it doesn't go up and down, if it just is in the middle all the time, then we're flatlining. So we need the ups, we need the downs to stay alive. That's what makes us human. That's what makes us living. Without the ups and the downs, we'd be flatlining, and nobody wants to flatline. So it's a perfect analogy of, yeah, the down moments, they do have to happen, because guess what happens at those down moments in the heartbeat? It then goes up to the top, and then, yeah, you're going to go back down. Then, but that's life. We're going to have the hard times, and I've heard so many people say that, oh, but I'm happy. And you're like, yeah, you can be happy, but still have unhappy moments. Let's not get toxic to think, this toxic positivity or toxic happiness where you think, wait a minute, like I can't ever be unhappy about anything. You can't. That doesn't mean you're unhappy as a person. You can be happy in your life and happy in your career and happy in relationships, whatever it may be. But guess what? Unhappy moments will still exist in your life. It's normal. They're part of life. And we just need to find a life where we have the happy moments. Sorry, we have the happy life with unhappy moments rather than the unhappy life with happy, fleeting moments. It's about getting that the right one, choosing the right one. And we go back to that point. The theme of this whole conversation is about choice and control. We take that control, we take that onus, we take that power, and if we give that power up, then we can't be surprised when we can't bounce back. We can't be surprised when we're unhappy because we've given the power up of what we want our life to look and to be and to feel. We take it, take power of your life, take control of your life, this one precious life that we've got. Take control of it and then start shaping it the way you want to.
Hmm. And that they're shaping it the way you want to, because like you said earlier, whether it's your core values, what you really want, when you start to stray from who you really are, who your soul really is, you end up going down paths that, I don't see. I've also realized that I don't think there's a right and a wrong path. I think your path, you go down the path that you're on at the time. It doesn't mean it's wrong. It's just where you are being taken at that time. That's how I see it now. And but if you do start to stray from, we're all born into this world, right? And the world is what changes our perceptions of everything. So, well, like I said, how you want your life to be, well, you said it. And if you start to stray away from who you really are, and you start to do things or feel things, believe things, take on things that they don't feel right. They don't feel right, but you do them anyway. Whether someone's told you to, whether you think you should, or whether because everyone in the community you live in does it, you should do it too, etc., etc., etc. The further you start to stray, the longer it's going to take you to get back. It's the whole thing about getting on the wrong train, of getting on the train and going the wrong direction and taking too many stops. The longer you go the wrong direction, the longer it's going to take to come back to the stop you're meant to get off at. But the more you start to stray from who you really are, I think in a way, the more you actually know it without realizing. Maybe it's an unconscious thing because it doesn't feel right.
Yeah.
And once you start to take that bit of control back and you start to remember who you really are, because I think we're all just remembering who we are. Once we start to remember who we actually are and we start to take the control back and we start to do things how we want to do things, look, we still might have loads internally, loads we're working on, loads of stuff from the past. Believe me, I'm sure everyone has. But the more we start living for who we are and what we want to do and take control of our lives, the more the more these happy moments and this happiness and this light and this love, the more these moments actually start to appear because finally we're living the life that we truly want to be living and actually we're meant to be living.
Exactly. And I think people get caught up in social media for these years, for so many years that they they're seeing in front of themselves this idea of what happiness is meant to look like, this idea of what success is meant to look like. And I never wanted to join the police, but I had this idea what success looked like because my brother joined the police at the exact same time as me. He's still in the police, whether that's happiness to him or not, who knows? But that was never my passion. That was never my life goal. But I did it because I followed other people's expectations. I followed other people's ideas what success and happiness looked like. And people would often talk to me and say to me, wow, you're in the police. That's a great job. That's a great career. You're just going up the ranks. And yeah, I wanted to go up the ranks and I'm a very ambitious person. But I'm like, but I'm not ambitious in the police. I don't want to go up the ranks in the police. I'm ambitious in terms of other passions that I've got now as a motivational speaker. I want to be the best. I want to be the best, and I am very ambitious, and that's my path. And that's not for everybody to have that goal, but that's my goal. That's my path. People will want children in their lives. People will want to have that forever home that's society dictates that we should have and get married, settle down, have the children, well, all these things. And that's fine if you believe it, but just don't get carried away and think that that's the only option, because life has shown that we've got so many different paths. Don't believe that's the right way to live because you see it on social media. Don't believe that's the way to live because you see other people do it. Just think to yourself, what makes me happy? What brings me joy? And this is why I always say go back to those core values.
Mm.
And we're all going to look different. Our paths are going to look different. And that's the best possible thing. Embrace your authenticity, embrace your uniqueness, and as a result, embrace your unique, happy path rather than following the one that's been passed so many times with so many other people.
Well, it's the path less traveled. Yeah. Not a lot of
Exactly.
people go down it, but again, it's back to the unknown. It's incredibly daunting, but it is full of miracles.
100%. And you'll never ever regret it, because that that path less traveled, it's not traveled for a reason, because it's
Mhm.
going to give you so much that you'll think to yourself, why did I not take that path earlier? But we take it when we need to take it. Whatever age you are, 20, 30, 50, whatever age you are, whenever you take that path, that is when you have to take that, because that's when you're ready to. That's I believe it. It's our path is when we take the path when we're ready to take it. End off. That's just life for you. We will go through so many different things in our life, and horrible things, unfortunately, and very happy things. But life will happen to you when it needs to happen to you, and you'll find that path when you need it the most. So when it does show itself, make sure you take it.
Yeah, it does. And I think it's a really important point to note is that whether, don't know if you had this or not, but I know I've had it where I've looked back and plenty of times thought, why didn't I start XYZ earlier, sooner? I mean, I'm not saying I'm old, but I mean, I still sit here and I think that sometimes, and it's exactly what you said. I don't think it shows up, whatever it is, until you're ready for it. Until you are ready to take it on. Because if it comes up too soon, you're gonna push it away because you're not ready for it.
Yeah,
And whatever age that might be. So never look back and wish you should have started anything sooner, because it's come at exactly the right time. So when that opportunity arises, don't let it pass. Like, don't let, and you'll know it, you'll feel it, you'll know the opportunity, you'll just know what I'm talking about, what we're talking about. Don't let it pass, because again, it's a calling out to go, right, I'm here, I'm ready, let's do this thing.
exactly. And it's hard. We talk about it and we're making it sound easy, but it's not easy, because you have to be brave. And having that brave moment to say, I'm ready to take this path, is so difficult, because you're accepting that everything that you thought once existed, everything that you thought you knew, is probably not. And you have to reshape your belief, you have to reshape who you are, you have to reshape everything. But when we are brave, when we have that courage to say yes, when we know we need to say yes, as I say, life will show you in an abundance of why you've said yes to it. And it's yeah, it's just so beautiful when you do make that decision, because you look back and think, I'm so glad that I didn't take it earlier. I'm so glad that the difficulties did happen, because it actually allowed me to say yes to this. It allowed me to be brave enough to say yes to it. And without the difficulties, I probably wouldn't have. So it's yet again a great way to shape difficulties so that you can bounce back.
Well, there are so many different ways of looking at it. And just for example, if I, just use my example about me, for instance, I just thought about it. I never wanted to run a half marathon ever, 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 ever before my accident. Never. And honestly, I
And
think
I
if
don't. And I don't. I don't blame you.
honestly, I think if I hadn't have had my accident, I still don't think I would have run one. And I never wanted to run one. And obviously, I had my accident, and when the idea was put to me, I thought, yeah, I want to show myself I can break my legs and I can run a half marathon. I wanted to put my mind, my body, and my soul through it. So again, I know, going through that gave me an incentive to be like, I want to show myself, I want to be brave, and I'm going to run a half marathon. Just because of what I've been through, I'm going to run a half marathon. And it's exactly like what you said. It's looking at the difficulties in your life and how can you transform your difficulties into something light? How can you transmute it, and how can you shift from it?
Exactly. And that last shift that happened to me, witnessing that 21-year-old, witnessing my colleague, that is one of the worst days of my life.
Mm.
But I now look back and I think that it's one of the best. And that at that time, if you told me that, I will look back and think that's, although how messed up that sounds, but if you tell me that day, you will look back in this and tell me that that's one of the best days of your life, I will say you're just completely wrong. Now, don't get wrong. I wish it didn't happen. Of course it didn't, but it did, and I can't take that away. And now I can look back and think it woke me up to life. And without it, I couldn't be doing what I do today. I couldn't be traveling the world, giving talks at organizations and conferences, making a difference in the way I love to do, helping people the way I love to do. I couldn't be doing any of that without that last shift. So I'm weirdly so thankful for it, even though, yet again, as I said, I wish those things never happened to those people, of course, but they did. And it's up to me then to shape how I view that day. And if me just thinking for the rest of my life, that's the worst day of my life, that won't give me anything. That won't serve me at all. But now, by doing the way I have, shaped it the way I have, I've been able to help other people because I've shaped it in the right way.
And it's exactly like you said about the anger and resentment. You hold on to something. Well, you can hold that on to someone for the rest of your life, but they're going to get on with their life fine while you are holding this to them or against them or for them or whatever it is. You have to accept it, release it, understand it, let it go, and in a way it's exactly the same. You can hold on to something forever, but really, what's it going to do for you? What good is it really going to do if you just hold on to it forever?
Exactly. Pointless. Pointless. It'll only impact you negatively.
Hmm. Hmm. And then, what advice would you give to somebody then who's in that stage where I want to say they are in that rock bottom stage and they are in that darkness and they've had that, I guess they know it's that cry for help and they're feeling this isn't okay. I don't know what I want to do anymore. I want to get better, but what happens if I never get better? Or I want to heal, but what happens if I never heal? This is never going to work. What would you say to them?
You know what? You've probably asked that question the perfect way too, because that is probably everything that's going through their heads. And that's the worst thing that could be happening because they're getting overwhelmed by so many different things. They're getting overwhelmed by the what ifs. What if I don't get any better? But what will it look like if I do? And what will it look like if I don't? And how long is it going to take? Or we just need to simplify it and just think, what's the first step? What's this first small step that I need to do to get better? That's it. What's the first step I need to do to get better? And for me, what I always tell people to do is at the end of each day, say to yourself, write it down, whatever it may be, ask yourself the question, what have I done for my happiness today? That simple question. And that might be, you know what? I listened to my favorite podcast for an hour. I read a book for half an hour. I went for a spa day if you have the time to do that. Whatever it may be, what brings you joy? Make sure that you're doing something each and every day. And it might be 5 minutes because that's all the time you have that day. It might be longer than that. But each day, if you can check back in with yourself and say, what did I do for me? My happiness, not my family, it's not my friends. What have I done for me? All of a sudden, that small, powerful step then starts giving you positive results. Because, firstly, it tells you that you are a priority in your life. And secondly, it tells you that you're giving space to your happiness. When you get used to that, it becomes like a drug where you realize, wait, I always have to give space for something in my happiness. whatever it may look like. And that such a powerful thing that I took on in my life really made the biggest steps. A small thing made such a big thing because a big impact because I always thought like this idea of work-life balance. I always thought I had to wait for the weekends to do something for myself, and then when the weekends came, I was so exhausted that I didn't do anything. I always waited for the annual leave to do something, and I was like, wait a minute, it's in the everyday. I heard this analogy about brushing your teeth, and how many of us brush our teeth 9 hours the day before we go to the dentist? We just don't. Instead, we brush our teeth for 2 minutes, twice a day, every day since your last dentist appointment. Why? Compounding interest matters for our physical health and our mental health. It's the things you do every day for your mental health that will help you bounce back because you're just building your resilience day in, day out. And you're not getting overwhelmed by the what ifs. You're not getting overwhelmed by the end. What's the end goal here? What will I look like? You're just having the little building blocks, the stepping stones each and every day. And then when you look back, you realize, wait a minute, look how far I've come by
Mhm.
just asking yourself that little question. What can I do? What have I done today for my happiness? And it was really powerful for me just doing that, putting yet again putting the onus on me for my happiness rather than thinking that things are going to change because I'm still alive. You know, I it would have been careless of me to think that all of a sudden because I've got the reason to live that something will happen that will change my happiness for me rather than I actually need to do it for myself. So something like that, I think just focus on those little small things and asking yourself that question can really make the big differences.
And they can be as tiny as drinking your morning coffee in your favorite mug.
Exactly. And that's a personal favorite of mine. Going out for a coffee, just going out for a coffee, just something simple.
Yeah.
Yet again, just understanding what you love. And like me with music, if I listen to music just for 10 minutes, I love music. It brings me different places. It relaxes me, it grounds me. Something so simple, but if I look back at the end of the day and say, well, no, I did that for 10 minutes over, during a very busy day, I'm
Yeah.
like, good. I did something for me that really grounded me and helped me and brought me happiness. So, yeah, it's the little things that we need to understand make the biggest differences.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, there is beauty in every day. There really is. And it usually is the small things in life. It's always been one of my favorite sayings, but it really, really is the small things in life.
Yeah, definitely. And we just overlook them. We overlook them
Yeah.
so much in our life. But if there's any time to not overlook them, it's when you've hit that rock bottom. It's when you're finding your way back. That is the time to appreciate the small things more than ever.
Hmm. Yeah, exactly that. Exactly. So, is there anything else that you'd like to share today?
No, in terms of, I think, you know what, we've actually covered quite a bit, haven't we? We've done well with how people can bounce back better. And yeah, it's just this idea of make sure that you know that your path is going to be unique to you. Don't think that, oh, look what I've went through all these difficult things when that person beside me's not had to go through difficult things or they seem to get everything handed to them, whatever it may be. We all have our different paths, and the difficult moments are just building you, they're making you stronger. We just have to view them like that, view them as in a positive way as much as we can, to be like, well, what can I learn from this? What is this teaching me? And put onus for your happiness onto yourself and not to others.
And actually, you mentioned it before. It's in the everyday. No, you're not. I'm gonna be honest, you're not gonna as soon as you decide you want to heal from something, you're not gonna get better the same day. You're just not. Like, when you cut yourself, your cut doesn't disappear the same day. Like
Yeah.
it just doesn't. And that's hard, but it's unfortunately it's the truth. And every day you think you're going 20 steps back, you're not. Some days it may feel like two steps back, one forward, but a lot of the times it's two forward, one back. It's yin and yang. It's how it works. But it's in the everyday, exactly what you said. And if you're showing up for yourself in whatever way it may be, every single day, at some point there will be able to be, well, many times, but there even be one major time when you can look back, whether it's a month, whether it's a year, whether it's 5 years down the line or more, and you can look back and you can just say, wow, If I never started that day, I wouldn't be here. You may still be going through the things or other things, you don't know, but you can look back and go, wow, look how far I've come, and I am so proud of myself for starting.
100%. That the only way that we can get up, the only way that we can bounce back is by starting. That's the only way that we can do it.
It really is. It is. Well, thank you very much for joining me.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you for being here today. Life will knock us down, sometimes hard, and sometimes more than once. And when it feels impossible, know that your story isn't over yet. Sometimes, when everything is falling apart, it's really falling into place. You have the power to rise, to heal, to make magic, and to evolve. And you have the power inside you. We all do. You have the power to get back up.